What's up, everybody? It's your man, MG Marcus Grant. And are you looking to stay up to date with the latest goings-on of your favorite, or maybe not so favorite NFL team? Well, how do you do that? You go directly to the source. Every week, Madi Kroll is doing just that with On the Beat, talking to beat reporters from across the National Football League. Be sure to check it out each and every week on 32-Bit.
What is up, everyone? This is Madi Kroll coming back to you with On Beat. Stacey filled in for me last week, and he had a phenomenal show. Make sure you guys check that out on YouTube. And I'm really excited about today because we have Stephanie Stradley, or Steph, because I've internet stalked her enough that we can be friends. She covers the Houston Texans via the Houston Chronicle. She's written for them a lot of different places, and she's also a lawyer. Quite the title you have racked up there.
Well, thank you. It's nice to be here.
I have to ask, with your interest in sports and your legal background, did you ever consider being like a sports agent or anything like that?
At the time that I went to law school, I didn't think that sports careers were anything that was an opportunity. And frankly, I had to make money right away because I didn't have anything to fall back on. So it was something, me getting involved with sports was absolutely an accident, but has been just really a great thing in my life.
I love that. Sometimes passion projects turn into the best things, the things that we look forward to doing every day.
Oh,
that's
definitely
awesome. Yay. Okay. Well, let's get into some Houston Texans football because with this organization, it just kind of seems like there's always something going on.
Yeah.
Never a dull moment, but it's also kind of like I'm sure the fan base is ready for things to settle and start progressing. One of the things that I wanted to get into first is really the Brian Flores lawsuit and how that has impacted the organization. Obviously, he's filing a racial discrimination case, and he has now included the Houston Texans. How has this affected the organization, or do you think it has?
Well, I mean, it may have changed their entire head coach search because at the time that hit, he told them that the lawsuit was going to be filed. The rumors were that they may be hiring Josh McCown, who has not had a coaching position at any level, much less head coach. And then another person that was in the running was Jonathan Gannon, who also had not been a head coach. And, Brian Flores, he had been a head coach and had done pretty well given, some of the limitations that he had for the Dolphins. So they it was kind of like a record scratch. Oh, now it's Levi Smith. But I mean, to be fair to everybody involved, Levi Smith, out of 2020 was just an atrocious season. 2021 was very weird. Just the way they communicated and acted and did business with others just didn't seem very normal and football professional. But one of the people out of the 2021 season that did seem that way was Levi Smith because, he's clearly had time, being a public figure, knowing the obligations and responsibilities and professionalism that comes from having that job. And, in his role as defensive coordinator, he seemed like normal football. And really, I'm not going to speak for all fans because fans have a lot of different points of views, but really what Houston Texans crave more than anything is just being a normal professional football team. That, is focused on football and not just kind of all the ancillary strange things that have happened, not just recently, but over time. Like this has been an overtime situation. And, that's really what people crave. Just generally, like, can we just have a normal football team?
Right. It almost kind of feels like they need a true franchise player that can be out in the community to replace JJ Watt. That was a big loss, being able to find something community based.
I think in some ways that is overblown. Like I think that has to happen in an organic way, that you can't force that. And they do have some candidates on their team that can be that person, but really there is just a profound lack of trust between various people. Like, every football
Mhm.
team has kind of internal stakeholders and external stakeholders. And the internal stakeholders are all the people inside the organization that want it to succeed. And then the external stakeholders are your fans, potential players, agents, any number of people. And there just is not a lot of wide trust. And part of the reason is, the Texans act like everybody should trust what they're doing. And in fact, that's what the owner said when he announced that Nick Caserio was going to be the next head coach, is like, trust us to do what's right. Well, why should anybody? Like, if
Right.
if you weren't a part of it, why would you ever feel like this is a trustworthy situation where, certain things are rumored and, just do normal football things,
Yeah.
do normal professional football things, and not just your view of what professionalism is, but understand the expectations that internal and external stakeholders have of professional football. And I don't
Mhm.
think that there is 100% overlap. Like, I think that most people, that look at this like, hey, we agree about 98% of things, but those 2% of things are not very trustworthy.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought that up because I also feel like with the Texans, one of their biggest issues is lack of direction. I don't think they know where they want to go or what end goal is, and that's hard to instill trust into your fan base, your team, your community if you don't really have a direction.
No, I think they do have a direction. Like, they have like their plan. They have their plan and they are committed to what their plan is. And they say that their plan is unique and they are clearly committed to a rebuild, right? So, but they're doing it on top of a situation where the Houston Texans have done lots of rebuilds, and the way that
Yeah.
the rebuilds have happened is they almost have higher standards for the players than they do for themselves.
Hmm.
And, so, it's hard to listen to them talk about some of these things. It's like, yeah, we've heard this before. We don't trust some of the things that you're doing because it's
Hmm.
not a new start. It's not a new start. The most
Same actions
controversial
happening.
the most controversial person in Houston, Texas right now is Jack Easterby, whose title is Executive Vice President of Football Operations and Director of Culture for the organization. And all that fans know about him is just what they have revealed about him or what is kind of out there in the universe. And people put their view of what he does on him. And
Hmm.
people don't see him the same way. And that is a really hard thing. And he's also like really close friends with the owner.
Right.
And just, I don't care. Like, I don't know him as a human being
Hmm.
because we can't really, we're not like that. But what I can say is externally, it's not a healthy situation when you have somebody that's that close to the owner who's directing things that doesn't have wide trust among people. And
Hmm.
so people attribute things to him that may not be his responsibility or he wasn't behind, but who can know? Like,
Right.
you know, he's the person that preaches against distractions, but he's clearly a distraction and nobody can tell him anything to do because he's friends with the owner. Like, I don't care who would be in that position. Like, I don't know of another franchise that has director of football ops and, director of culture for the whole organization. I mean, that's a lot of power that goes into somebody that the owner trusts, but
There's no accountability or checks and balances
no,
system in
definitely
play
no
here.
accountability. Like, it's one of those things where everyone else is forward facing and has to answer to these things. And
Hmm.
there's not really a good description of what he does. And, for some people, it's like, look, I am out with the Texans until he's gone because we just don't trust this. But then there's other people like, hey, this is this is their choice and we just have to go with it. And, I just really wish they did more work to build wide trust, but I don't see a pathway for there to be wide trust with Jack Easterby, just because there's just a very different view of what his role is. And, like if, for example, if you're a football person working for the organization, do you want somebody with his background overseeing what you're doing? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. And it's just out there. Like it undermines trust for the whole organization because things are attributed to him that he's done and things are attributed to him that he hasn't done. But when you don't have wide trust, it's really hard to do things. Like you can do things without wide trust. It just makes things harder.
When they're already fighting an uphill battle,
Yeah.
basically. Rebuilds aren't easy. Kind of playing off that just a little bit, Cal McNair recently announced that they will be partnering with Texas Southern University, which is a notable HBCU. Do you think that is almost a reaction or an effect from what has played out with the Brian Flores debacle, like with the lawsuit? I feel like this organization's kind of caught heat for racial discrimination, and it's almost like some fans believe that this is almost a way to cover up or try to make it better.
Well, I can see why people would see that. I think that they have done things over time. What I will say is this. I know that there are people within the Texans organization that are extremely sensitive to charges that they are racist or they are sexist or they engage in religious discrimination, that they're very, very sensitive to those issues. And that it's almost like, and this is really hard to talk about, but it's kind of like something that we work with, like kind of on a larger society basis, that people think that their good intentions are enough. And really good intentions do matter, but it has to be in the context of like the wide situation. So it's not enough to commit to things. You have to go the next level and go, okay, is it being heard by people? Not so much the situation that you're talking about, but in general, like this is hard to talk about. Like, for example,
It is.
In the Sports Illustrated article, it was talking about how, for example, the Sports Illustrated article that talked about how Jack Easterby rose to power. They have rejected the characterization of a lot of the things in that. But one of the things that was a part of that story was various people being reluctant to leak, but was hoping that Cal was listening and saying, hey, look, I know, the general thought of it was, I know you have good intentions, but this person isn't sensitive in the way that he talks about these things. And it's offensive in ways that are uncomfortable to talk about. And you don't want to hurt his feelings about it. But at the same time, you can't run an organization in a way where people don't think that things are being handled and discussed in professional ways.
Right.
So it's like a dark cloud that kind of is over the organization, where the Texans are very hurt that people see them in this way. But at the same time, they are not really listening to people who are saying the way that you engage with others sometimes does not feel professional in this situation. And these are the hardest topics. Like, I've worked in human resources law before, and people get very hurt going, I didn't discriminate. I didn't do these things. And then the flip side is somebody going, well, but you said X, Y, and Z, and X, Y, and Z is like wildly uncomfortable and inappropriate to say and not professional in a work environment. And it's a really hurtful, like, how do you go from that? How do you go forward from that? And I think one of the things that the Texans have talked about is being honest about these things. But that's another thing in professional football. Like in professional football, you're supposed to keep your disputes in-house.
Hmm.
And when things are leaked, it's really, really unusual for those things to leak. But then but to get a job in the NFL is really hard. And
Hmm.
you don't want to leak things that are, that might have you lose your job or hurt you professionally, because there's very few sports jobs. And so those things are really hard for people to navigate. And the approach that I have seen is like people going, okay, this is who leadership has picked to go forward with things. I'm just going to keep my head down and do my job and stay within my lane. And that's all I can do and work around this.
Which
But I
is
mean, these are challenges that happen with every organization, and it's hard to
Mhm.
maintain over time. And then once things get out in a particular way, it's hard to put the toothpaste back in the tube, because
Right.
people have their impressions of people in the way that they interact with them.
Absolutely. Especially in today's society where it seems like cancel culture is prevailing in a lot of entertainment industries and aspects. Um,
But I don't really even see, like, I know cancel culture is a terminology, but
mhm,
it's not something that's particularly new. It's always been the case that fortunately in America, we do have the First Amendment, and you can't get jailed for the things that you say.
mhm,
There can be legal consequences if you defame somebody, for example. But it's always been that if people say something that others find objectionable, people are allowed to say, hey, this is objectionable. And if it's bad enough, they can say, I don't want anything to do with you because you have objectionable beliefs. And that's always been the case. And I know that there is this term cancel culture, but I mean, it's been like this forever. I think in some ways we need to work towards less kind of culture war terminology of things, and just
mhm.
really look towards, trying to find commonality, and that's hard because,
That's
people's feelings are involved, and my intentions are good. Why don't you see my intentions are good? And the reason is because people can't see in each other's hearts. Like, we
right.
just can't. And so people have impressions of things, and things can get bigger than what people originally intend.
Okay, well, let's get into some
Yes.
football talk. Talking about Lovie Smith, we watched everything that happened with David Culley. Do we feel like Lovie Smith is going to have a good amount of time to be able to do the things that they want to do to execute and grow and rebuild? Or do you think that it's kind of a temporary solution? What are the expectations?
I don't, it's hard to say.
Mhm,
I mean, David Culley was put in a particularly bad situation in that um, he was coming into a situation where it was his first time being this level of public figure,
mhm,
combined with Nick Caserio being in that role for the first time, a bigger role, combined with Jack Easterby, being in the biggest role of his football career, after the GM situation, and Cal McNair kind of getting a sense of what it's like to be the person that is in the forefront. So you had a
mhm,
lot of people who are kind of relatively new to being public figures, and and having a different level of that. And that can be really hard to navigate, particularly if there's a lot of like competing ideas of this is how we're going to go, or this is how we're going to go, or this is how
mhm,
we're going to go. And they're trying to come up with a collective of, well, this is the Houston Texans way of doing things. And it didn't come across that way. You had
mhm.
different people who are like, I'm the leader, I'm the leader, I'm the leader, or this is my point of view, but the way that it was being articulated didn't sound very authentic. Lovie Smith knows who he is.
Mhm.
Lovie Smith has dealt with this for a long time. He knows how to deal with, the pressures of that position. Now, they're bringing in different coaches from different backgrounds, and I don't know how much patience they're going to have with people,
Mhm.
but I could see them being fairly patient, but I mean, you can't really predict this. I mean, it may be that you went with Levi Smith because you were already paying off a bunch of former head coaches payouts. I mean, I don't know. I have no idea.
It will be interesting to kind of watch unfold. I do
Definitely.
feel I
And they
feel
have
like
they have draft picks this year. So I mean,
right.
maybe, you can turn around an organization if you get enough of the right people. And they have a new offensive scheme this year, like the first new offensive scheme since the Kubiak era, which has been, we're talking up like almost a decade.
And the head coaching styles switching tremendously too. I mean, we're going from an offensive minded coach and who has had experience and kind of focuses in that area to now we're now talking about more of a defensive minded coach. But I do feel
And
like Hamilton.
I didn't even really see David Culley as offensive minded head coach. I saw him as kind of more of the CEO model and trying to get, you know, make it better to lose, I guess. Make it feel better to
Make it
lose
softer. I
or
guess
more
my
resilient.
perception
But
of Coley
but
was
I
more
mean,
based
Lovie
off the
Smith knows who
Ravens.
he is.
Yeah. Um, okay, well, Pep Hamilton, I'm kind of excited about this move, promoting him from quarterback coach to now offensive coordinator. We know that he's dealt with and likes a lot of the RPO style offense that came out of Stanford, which is pretty complex for the NCAA. So it can transition well, I believe, to the NFL. But with changes, it's always hard. I kind of wanted to talk about Mills and how this is going to impact him. Do you feel like this is a good move for the quarterback that they are investing in?
I think so. I mean, it's really hard to say because there's not, we don't know what this group of offensive coaches can do together. We don't
Mhm.
know at this point what the roster is going to look like. But this is what we do know. Every player has strengths and weaknesses. And Davis Mills, given the situation that he was put in last year, did a remarkable job because
Absolutely.
it seemed like in some ways, he came across more professional in his interactions with others than some of the coaching staff did. Like he understands the obligations of that position. And you
Mhm.
could see it in a lot of the things that he did, which is, he kept confidence in himself, but he, wasn't being an egomaniac about things. He gave credit to people that maybe he shouldn't be giving credit to, but he knew the obligations of that. He's gotten wide receivers together in the off season, and he
Mhm.
was able to perform very well for a rookie, given that he had one reliable wide receiver, an offensive line that
It was rough. They
was
It
very
was
rough,
rough.
and he had no running game. And he took some really hard hits, didn't complain,
Mhm.
got up and went on. And, he has the attributes that you would like to see in an NFL quarterback. I mean, really, this season's going to be, can he survive? Are they going to put him in good positions? Are they going to have the right tools with them? Are they going to have offensive line coaching that is part of a coherent offense?
Mhm.
Because you can say, hey, I'm bringing this over from my previous situation, but you have to see how it all works together. you know Bringing different coaches from different systems and saying, hey, this is our system, that can be hard to do. Sometimes
Yeah.
it works out and sometimes it doesn't work out. Like the best offensive schemes typically are, hey, this is a collection of people that are used to working together, and we've had success with this offensive scheme where we used to work all together, and now we're going to put it here, and it works really well. But I mean, Pep Hamilton has had success in various locations, has worked with some very good quarterbacks. And, they're saying that they have confidence in Davis Mills. He's demonstrating some of the characteristics that you would like to see in an NFL quarterback. But at the same time, they also came in saying, from last year, they want competition at every position, and currently they probably would like to increase the competition at that spot.
I'm sure they would, but it's also still a business, so at a cheap rate. I think, especially with what's available in the draft class as far as quarterbacks go, this was really the best move. And I feel like Hamilton and Mills have a good foundation. I think that that's nice because we talked about how important trust was at the beginning of this podcast. And you're right, he was successful in situations where really the odds were stacked against him on whether he could go out and perform. And no one really expected him to do as well as he did under those circumstances. So I'm excited to see what they do coming into year 2 with a plan. And I like that they're kind of building on what they did last year, but in a more transitional way, if that makes sense. Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about the draft. So
Yes.
they have 11 picks unless something wild happens, which is totally a possibility. My first
Definitely.
question is, do we think that there's any chance they will trade back pick 3?
I think that they would love to trade back. I don't know how many mock drafts you've been working on, but in that spot, there's any number of players that you can go, and it's really a matter of what is it that you value. I think they would like to trade back from 3. The question is there, you would like to trade back, but you have to have a trade partner. And is there any player that people are going to feel motivated enough to move into that spot? And he is like Nick Caserio is likely to have groupings of players that he wants at different tiers. And at 3, there's lots of great players to pick from. There's some views that they may not be able to get a trade partner at 3, but 13 might be a spot where people might target. We'll see. I mean, there's a lot of quarterback needy teams, and all it takes is one team to go, hey, this is the guy that we want, and we better get him because we need somebody this bad. And swinging big for the quarterback spot, it's the most important spot in the team. Like, the whole story of the Houston Texans over time is, if you don't have a quarterback, you are dead in the water.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the story of the Houston Texans over 2 decades. And, the team is seen flailing around to find somebody, embarrassing choices in that regard. And then some people that were functional in that, and then some people who have been traded away from the team. So, quarterback's important. All it takes is one team to want to trade into that spot. And, how high do you need to trade up for to get the quarterback that you want? And we'll find out.
I'm excited. I feel like there's a strong possibility that might be coming.
I don't know about 3. I don't know about 3,
But 13,
I know,
I
but
agree
I
with
do
that.
know that Nick Caserio, unlike some GMs, has no issue trading any direction that he wants to get picks. It's the way that the picks are distributed is kind of weird. They have a lot of picks up high, then there's a gap, and then they have a lot of picks low. And so, if they're a player, what I think is going to happen is they're going to identify players that they want in the building, for their traits and who they are as people.
So more of their
Knowing that they have,
personality traits than athletic
well,
abilities.
just the traits of, like, how are you going to be a pro? Are you going to be a good professional football player? And those that's hard to project. But I think that they are going to be looking for specific individuals that they are targeting, and will not mind moving up and down in the draft to get those people.
Do you think that there's one position that they should focus on early?
Oh, geez. There's a lot of different directions that way. Some people have the view that, hey, if you're building, if you're rebuilding, do it by the lines. I know Levi Smith has mentioned that in order to play the defense that he wants to play, he needs corner. I mean, it's really hard. Like, if we're talking top of the draft, you would have a hard time going wrong with, let's say, a Sauce Gardner pick. if you're Levi Smith and you think your defense is part of the offense, that takeaways are a big thing, and you like length, that would be a direction that would not be surprising.
Mhm.
But there's a lot of different choices that way. Like the Houston Texans could pick any position and get an upgrade. And I think, I've played around with some mock drafts. It's really easy to go, okay, I'm going to get all of these different players from all of these different position groups. And, this is the rookie that's going to be developed, and then match them with, spot free agents that you're bringing in on 1 or 2 year deals.
Mhm. I selfishly hope that they save some of the offensive line for later and not
Mhm.
go early, because a lot of the guys that are going to go early in the tackle position are left tackles, and it's really hard for an offensive lineman to come out when they've been playing one position and switch to another position on the offensive line. You think that it would
That
be interchangeable, but for some reason in the NFL, these coaches are like, let's swap them around, play musical chairs. And we've just seen it over and over again. It's a really hard transition.
Well, that is a topic of discussion in Houston, Texas, because
Yeah.
for a long time, especially under kind of the New England point of view, we want our best 5 offensive linemen in whatever configuration. And that has not worked well. Now, I will tell you, but I will say being able to have some flexibility that way is really important when you have,
Mhm.
you're dealing in, a situation where tackles go away, there's injuries, and there's absences, whatever. Like you need to have some flexibility. Now, some
Right.
teams take the approach that, hey, these are the parameters that we want to see in our tackles. These are the parameters we want to see in our guards. These are the parameters we want to see in our centers. And they're
Mhm.
pretty specific about, okay, maybe we'll, work with some swing tackles, but we're not going to try to work too much between, tackle and guard. And, typically in recent years, they've just had a lot of people that have tackle bodies and then put them at guard. And it has not worked well.
No.
And, but ultimately, a lot of that is going to also come down to quarterback, because a lot of offensive line play looks better if you have a better quarterback. If you get rid of the ball quickly, you know where the ball is supposed to go. I mean,
Yeah.
so I think that they are not going to be deterred from taking a tackle any place that they want
Early.
to, even if they have to park them at right tackle for a while or whatever, because there's some questions about how long the tackles that they currently have are going to be at those positions.
Okay. And then I want to get into just like one or two more questions.
Sure.
I'm trying to see who I want to talk about Marlon Mack first.
Oh,
I want to know, is there any chance he will be the featured back in Houston?
and I will say too early.
Yeah.
Um, I do think that, running back's one of those positions where young players can excel in a very quick way. And there's some very good running backs in this draft. And a lot of with Marlon Mack, we need to see how well he's come back from injury, and how well he works in this offense.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, at this point, it is too early to say, but I think that they draft a running back, and but they didn't seem to be very interested in rookie running backs last year, so who
I
knows?
know. Well, and then you have an offensive line that was again 32nd pass
Yeah,
pass blocking and run blocking. So
we're gonna have to do a lot of projection going into this year, and like you shouldn't assume that they're gonna be good until they're good,
right.
because they haven't been good at running the football. Like they've had a lot of volume over the years,
Hmm.
but they haven't been good at running the football since Arian Foster and since Kubiak, really, because Arian Foster overlapped with Bill O'Brien, but during that overlap, it looked as though most of the yards he was getting was kind of through individual effort and not through the scheme being particularly good for him.
I love that you said that because, I mean, it's true. Everything
Yeah.
is so situational. We're gonna have to wait and see what happens. And then we did have one of our fans wanted to know about Nico Collins and how him and Davis Mills obviously are coming in and they're growing together. Do you feel like there's going to be more value from a fantasy standpoint for Collins going into 2022?
I mean, it's certainly something to look for. I think with a lot of the fantasy questions with the Texans, it's going to be about monitoring what is happening in training camp. Like, training camp's hard to
Mm-hmm.
project, but sometimes you can see things developing. Like, the Arian Foster
That's true.
example. You could see in that training camp that Arian Foster was going to be a beast, and he was. His year 2 was one of those things where, like, they drafted Ben Tate, but you could see in training camp that, this undrafted guy, Arian Foster, was doing better. And so, yeah, I could see Nico Collins having a breakout year. But because of his relationship and working with him over time, but, we're going to have to see, but I mean, he has good measurables. He had good moments. He just didn't get the targets. And so the
Right.
question is going to be, does he get the targets? I mean, because
Yes.
you have Cooks.
Yeah.
Cooks just signed an extension, and when he was on the field at the same time that Davis Mills was, he was getting a lot of targets because Brandon Cooks is good.
Mm-hmm. He's demanding that. Okay. One fun question before we go.
I
What
like
has
fun
been,
questions.
I know, me too. What has been your favorite memory since you've been covering the Houston Texans that has to do with just something fun that sticks out to you?
Oh, geez. There's been so many. I mean, it is really
It's tough to choose just one. I hate
it is tough to choose just one. I would probably say when, a long, long time ago, I was voted the number 1 Texan fan because, I am a fan blogger, and I was voted number 1 Texan fan. I found out in the 3rd quarter of the game. And so it's the closest that I will ever feel to being like a rock star because everybody was just like bashing me in the head and stuff. And even just being a finalist of this competition, you got to run out of the tunnel with the Texans flags.
That's
And so I
awesome.
had one of the Texan flags. I'm waving it before the game. It's very cool. And and it was like the only time my sister was able to go to a game, and
Oh,
she had been in the hospital for a long time, and so it was just
she battled cancer, correct?
yes,
Yeah.
yes. But she was in remission then and was at that game, and she got to experience that whole thing with me, and it will always be special. And then I ended up getting a trip to the Super Bowl. I mean, it was a very sweet time,
That's
just
amazing. That's something that will turn you into a fan for life if you weren't already.
yeah, I mean, there's so many good fans of the Texans, people that just want to see, we saw the Rockets win a championship, we saw the Astros win a World Series, but this is Texas and it's football, and you just want to be able to watch good football
Mhm.
good football that's relevant and in the off season where you have a feeling like, hey, this could be the year. And
Right.
you can have the big turnarounds like you've seen with the Bengals. That was a pretty amazing run.
Massive turnarounds, yeah.
But and there's so much change in the way that the quarterbacks have been. And it's like, maybe someday, someday,
Fingers crossed.
like first you just need to have professional, relevant football.
Start with
That's
the basics.
Start with the basics, like make it about football, and And hopefully, hopefully the Texans have a healthier relationship with the fan base. Like, I feel kind of caught in the middle of all of this because over the years, a lot of what I've written is explaining the team to the fans and explaining the fans to the team. And there's just such a disconnect on some things. Like, every time they do something good, they do something else that's like inexplicable, and it pushes people away. And as many Texan friends that I have so many more sports friends that don't want anything to do with the Texans, and that's a shame because
It
there's so
is.
many people that want to like the team, and sometimes the team makes it hard to be a fan, and it shouldn't be that way. There's
Right.
been moments where it's not been that way. You mentioned JJ Watt, and a lot of that was bringing everybody together after Hurricane Harvey was an amazing thing. Was an
Hmm.
amazing thing. And I like when we all work together to find a way that we all win.
Right.
That we
That
all win.
community feel.
Yeah, but it's really hard when it's a situation like, we're going to do things that are good for you and trust us that we know what we're doing, instead of saying, hey, let's all work together and make this happen.
Yeah.
And that seems like a distinction without a difference, but there really is a difference.
No,
There
there
really
is.
there is. And I hope that they work more to bring people more on the fold, not just the people that are inclined to agree with them no matter what, but be just kinder to the people that want to like them,
Hmm.
want to be on board, but that they do things that make it difficult sometimes. And I know they've gone through a lot of difficulty with how the whole Deshaun Watson thing happened and how some of their hires have happened. And they just need to kind of build trust with people and make peace with people in a real way, not in a, hey, this is how we're doing things, and if you don't like it, too bad.
Right. In an inclusive way. Okay. You are absolutely amazing. I feel
Oh,
like I'm looking at a lot of these topics in a completely different perspective. And I love
oh,
that because that's how we grow and that's how we can get better and understand better. So I'm really excited because
oh, good.
hopefully somebody else out there is experiencing the same thing. Where can everyone find you and find your work?
Probably the easiest way is if you hop on Twitter at Steph Stradley. It's all my stuff's in the bio. I have some of the stuff on the Houston Chronicle website. And then some of the things, if you Google any version of my name, Steph Stradley, StephanieStradley.com, you get my personal writing that doesn't really fit anyplace else.
I love that. I love that. I love when everything's central. I told you that earlier. It's so
Yeah.
much easier when you can go to someone's Twitter and say, okay, this is where I can find everything.
Find my
So,
stuff right here.
yeah, yeah, everybody should give her a follow. Give us a like on YouTube. Give us a follow on Twitter. And I hope you all have a great week. Thank you so much, Stephanie.
Thank you.